Hey everybody, it's me, Mel, and this is your favorite podcast, of course, called One Mel of a Podcast. And today I'm interviewing John H. Howard, a very good friend of mine, and he's the one who gave me the name for the podcast. I have to do that, I'm sorry. All right, so we have some questions, but first of all, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited to be on your podcast with you to kick things off.
I know, I'm so excited. I love doing this interview stuff on this podcast. It's becoming my favorite thing to do. It's like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to record today.
That's so exciting. I've been looking forward to this since we set it up, so.
That's awesome.
Hopefully it goes smoothly.
Yes, it's awesome. I'm having a good time. So let's start it off here with, when did you decide to start writing?
So I dabbled a little bit in high school, and that was some time ago, and I won't tell you exactly when I graduated, but it was in the early 90s. I won't say that anything I wrote at that time was any good, but I enjoyed writing it, and I kind of continued with it just as like a hobby for some time, and I officially, I think I would say that I sat down to start writing in the early 2000s with a story that I had actually started writing in high school. But I had found that a secondary character that I had come up with was more interesting than my main character. So I followed his storyline instead. That story has yet to get finished or published, but I will say that the first time I got published, I would say marked my entry into the writing world maybe even more officially, and that was with the publication of a story called Cry of the Banshee. And that, I believe, is with an anthology that you and Jenna Miller had come up with, which was called Tome of Ancient Realms.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yes. That's right. I remember that story.
Yes.
And I have that book.
So yeah, that was my first time getting published, and I've gotten a story published almost every year since then, sometimes a couple times a year. So I guess you could say I kind of caught the bug once that happened. I've been chasing that high ever since.
Oh, heck yeah. I remember that anthology. I think I actually have a copy of it around here.
I know I do.
I have a couple of the anthologies. I don't have them all, though, but I should get them all.
I have the ones that have my stories in them.
Yeah, I get that. I have to get a copy of the last anthology, too, so
yes,
that'll definitely be on my list here soon. So when you started writing, did you consider using a pen name?
I did consider it, but considering the amount of trouble I have actually coming up with character names, I kind of scrapped that idea pretty quickly, honestly. I couldn't come up with one that I liked for myself, so I just used my given name, which is John H. Howard.
Oh, so there you go.
Not too inspired, I guess, but it is what it is.
It works. Whatever gets your name out there, right?
Yep, exactly.
So what do you hope readers gain from your books, from your stories?
At the end of the day, I think on a very surface level, I hope they read my stuff and just say, I really enjoyed that story. That was a fun story, and I would like to find more of his work to read. Some of my stories have deeper layers to them, and I hope that some of my readers can penetrate into those layers and kind of get my deeper meanings that I try to instill my stories with. Mm-hmm. On a slightly higher level, I hope that my readers can maybe get a different perspective or find that something they thought about in one way is presented a different way and lets them consider things from a different point of view. If I make my readers think a little bit or consider something that maybe they hadn't considered or have an experience they didn't think was possible, I would consider that a job well done on my part.
Absolutely. Excellent. Good answer. So how do you deal with negative reviews? Because that's something every writer out there on Twitter that I see is trying to figure out.
It's definitely a shot to the ego, but you kind of have to take them in perspective. I know one of the anthologies that I have a story in got a negative review. The editor strongly believes it was someone that maybe she had rejected and was kind of lashing out.
Oh.
So situations like that, you kind of just have to push aside. I received not a negative review on my novella Ordinary Heroes, but it was a mediocre review. But I also, after reading it, I realized that the person who left it actually left some pretty good feedback. And I read that review and said, I will take this into account for my writing going forward. So if it's something negative that has some feedback as to why they didn't appreciate it, and I feel like it's something that I can use to improve my writing, then I try to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like getting those reviews with the feedback, even if it is negative, because sometimes it helps.
Yes. It's nice to have the positive ones too, with positive feedback saying, I love this story and I would love to read anything this person wrote.
Exactly.
But, we can't get all 5-star reviews.
I wish, but I did love Ordinary Heroes. That was one of my favorite things that you've written.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And if anybody wants to know, I highly recommend it. Go buy that book right now. Let's see. So when you complete a book, do you have a celebration ritual that you do?
Not so much a celebration ritual. What I might do is take a little bit of time off from writing. I might kind of dive into and finish whatever book I'm reading or whatever video game I'm playing. Just kind of take some time off, refresh my head, think about the next project I want to tackle. And, like I said, just give myself a few days away to kind of refresh myself and look forward to whatever project I'm going to work on next. I'm the type of writer who I need to incubate ideas for a while before I actually start writing them. So that gives me time to kind of do that and clear my head of the project I just finished and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah, mm-hmm. I have to clear my head too once in a while, mm-hmm. especially when you have more than one project going on. Tell you what.
Is there a writer who doesn't?
I don't know, because there's some people on Twitter that are like, how many whips do you guys have? And it's like, 15.
Right. I think I've got 4 right now.
Right. Too many to count. How's that?
Yes.
So I'm taking from this that you're self-published, or did you go the traditional route?
So with my novella, Ordinary Heroes, which came out in 2017, I did self-publish that one.
Okay.
Now, my short stories have all been published, not by the traditional route, but just in anthologies. Some by people I knew, like Jenna Miller or Sarah Walker. Some I've put out there, and they've been accepted by small publishers or indie publishers.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Very cool. And now the biggest question that I ask every writer, are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am a pantser by nature.
Woohoo!
I have tried to plot, and I can do it to some degree, but I find at a certain point that my characters take on a mind of their own, a life of their own. They kind of carry the story away. But that's also what I really actually love about writing, and kind of why I started doing it, is because I kind of like not always knowing what happens next, and I love it when my characters surprise me in that way, and my story will turn a corner, somebody will react a way I hadn't expected. I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. Like, for example, in my current work in progress, it's a novel about a demon hunter, and there is a character I had assumed was just going to be a very tertiary character. She's going to appear in one scene, and we'd never see her again. And then 2 chapters later, she appears again, and my characters are like, hey, come on with us and join our group. And I was like, okay, this is very interesting. I didn't see this coming.
Of course.
Let's see where this goes. And now this character is a major character, and it turns out that she has some magical powers, which I didn't know about when I initially started writing her. So that's what I absolutely love about what I do.
Right.
And why I keep doing it.
Isn't that great? I mean, seriously. Yes, I talk to my characters all the time. I call them divas.
I like that.
They're all divas. They're like, I want the spotlight and I want it now. And it's like, dude, you have to wait for their spotlight to end,
Sometimes. Yep. They all have a voice and they all want to speak to you very loudly.
Yes, they do. Dang it. Especially at 3 a.m. when you're trying to sleep. Why? Nope. Why? Why at that time? Don't you guys ever sleep? What the hell? So how do you get your story ideas?
My most tried and true way of coming up with story ideas is by asking the question, what if? Mm-hmm. I'll go into an ordinary situation and say, what if this weird twist happened? Or I will try to take 2 very disparate ideas and combine them together in an interesting way. That's another way that I get my ideas.
Okay.
For example, with going back to Ordinary Heroes, the main character has the ability to see auras. And that is a result of a treatment that she received, an experimental treatment she received for cancer that she had. Mm-hmm. Now, take that and you put her in a world of superheroes, and I think that's a very interesting combination. So you have this person who has this ability to read people's auras and kind of know what they're thinking or what they're about. And you have them existing in this world full of superheroes where she doesn't see herself as a hero, And then you combine those two things, you mash them together, and you get something very interesting, I think.
Okay. Okay, so speaking of ordinary heroes, how did you come up with that story idea?
It was partly inspired because I had seen a call for submission about superhero short stories.
Okay.
And I sat down and I tried to write one. I was thinking, well, what can I do for a superhero short story, where I can convey it in a short form, something that's different, hasn't really been done. And at the time, my mom was going through her third bout with cancer.
Oh.
And I had a friend who was also going through cancer. That's how I got my idea for my main character.
Mm-hmm.
It's based more on my friend. Her name was Jackie, and my mom and my friend Jackie have both since passed. They lost their battles to cancer.
Yeah.
So I will say that. But I took that idea, and I kind of had my friend Jackie in mind when I wrote this, and kind of put a short story together, ran it by a friend, and that friend said, no, this needs to be a longer story. I think you've got more to tell here. So I was like, okay, I will do that. And I discovered that there was actually more to that story. And I really enjoyed discovering that as I went. But it was just kind of like going back to your original question, it was just kind of asking those questions. Well, what if you have this person who had this experimental treatment for this cancer and it caused this particular side effect?
Right.
And what if they existed in this world full of superheroes? What would that look like? What would happen? Especially if she just wanted to be an ordinary person. She's a server at a superhero themed, not a sports bar, but a restaurant sort of along those lines. And what if she just wanted to be that person? She wanted to be a mother. She just wanted to go about her life. She didn't want these powers, and yet she existed in this world where her life was affected almost every single day by the presence of these superheroes and supervillains.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got around to that premise.
Okay.
So, which I think worked pretty well.
So how do you overcome writer's block?
After I give up on my story several times, and after my wife tells me, no, you need to get back and write, I get back and start writing again.
Good.
It's basically what it comes down to. And being a pantser, too, it's really easy to talk myself out of writing because I continue to tell myself, I don't know what happens next. Therefore, I'm going to procrastinate and do something else. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to play a video game. I'm going to watch a TV show and not think about this. And tell myself that I'm actually thinking about it in the background and really I'm just procrastinating. It's really easy to
It
do.
is. I mean, and it's so funny because I have been procrastinating a couple of my stories that I have to rewrite and edit and all that. And I had a huge epiphany today while I was doing dishes and I was like, all right, fine, I'll write.
Yep, and that's actually a really good point. Doing mundane chores like dishes or the lawn or taking a walk or something like that. I've had some of my best ideas in the shower, and I know that's not uncommon, but it's like you put yourself in a space where your hands or your body are busy and your mind is kind of free to kind of work on things in the background. And I think that's a really good way to do it. But really, ultimately, for me, it's just, as my wife says, I have to let my characters tell me what they want and where the story goes next. I just have to listen to them and trust them. And I just have to sit down and do the work.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because you always seem to have that breakthrough epiphany when, like if you're in the shower, you don't have a pen and paper handy. So you're sitting there, quick, get your shower done. Oh my God, repeat it in your head.
Yes. That has happened.
Yes, completely know that.
I've lost, I think, there's some pretty good ideas as a result of not having pen and paper
I
handy.
know. Me too. It's like, oh man.
It's one of the dangers.
So as an author, how do you use social media?
Not well, truthfully. I was on Twitter for a while and found that it really didn't suit my communication style.
Yeah.
I really couldn't figure out how to use it to my benefit. I ended up actually getting rid of that account. I do, however, have my own personal account on Facebook and my own author profile as well. I know that I do not use them to their best advantage. One reason for that is because I'm really, really terrible about marketing myself.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's something I really need to work on. So if I could sit and focus on that a little bit, I think I could use social media to much better effect. I have purchased some ads and stuff on my author profile account. I didn't really necessarily feel that the payoff for me, being a relatively unknown author, was really worth what I was putting into it at the time. So
yeah,
I think maybe once I build my library a little bit, put a few more stories out there, maybe get a novel published or two, maybe then I can really kind of start building up that social media presence a little bit better than I have.
Well, if you ever need help with Twitter, I'm always willing to help with that because I've learned how to use it pretty well.
I definitely need to hit you up for that, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
I appreciate the offer.
Oh, Oh, absolutely. You know, all I want to do is help out other people. Come on.
Yes. It's much appreciated.
That's what Jenna and I started off at the beginning was, you know, trying to make sure people didn't get scammed the way we did. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So have you based any characters off of people you know personally?
I have, as I mentioned with Ordinary Heroes, that character Jackie was based off of somebody I knew whose name actually was Jacqueline, and I called her Jackie.
Right.
Once I had kind of written my first draft for that story, I did run it by her. I said, this is what I'm thinking, and with your permission, I'd like to use your name. I used her first name with her permission, changed the last name because I wanted there to be a separation between the actual person and the fictional person.
Right.
And that character was very loosely based on her. I used her physical description. I also used her image on the cover with her permission. Again.
Aw.
Yes. So that lovely image on the cover is my friend Jackie.
That's awesome. What a great way to immortalize a friend, you know?
Yes. Thank you. So, but the character herself was just basically me trying to capture her personality more than actually trying to represent her in any particular real way. Of course, it was a work of fiction, so I didn't want to necessarily say, this is my friend Jackie. This is a loose approximation of my friend. And it was done in a way that was meant to honor her. And I do feel that she felt that. We had a lot of conversations about it. I showed her every draft, and she really enjoyed the story. Her family enjoyed the story. And for anybody who is out there thinking, this doesn't matter, it's ultimately not going to mean anything, you never know who you're going to touch with your writing.
Exactly.
And I feel that every story has some value in it. You never know who's going to react to that story or what effect it's going to have. So my unsolicited advice is to keep writing, even when it's difficult, because it's absolutely worth it.
Preach. That's it right there.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so what part of the book was the best part to write, and what was the worst part to write?
I think the best part to write was the first chapter where I was kind of getting to know her and kind of describing her abilities and introducing her to the audience, because I was trying to introduce the audience to a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And that was very important to me that I got that right. I feel like I nailed it. My friend Jackie said, this feels just like me.
Aww.
So I felt that was very rewarding. One of the most difficult parts for me to write actually was a part where she is attacked by someone that she had tried to leave behind.
Right.
And it was fairly brutal. It was difficult for me to put that on paper because I don't want to glorify violence, especially violence against women in any way.
Yeah.
She manages to get out of it with some help, but that was particularly difficult for me to write. I had to try to figure out what my boundaries were going to be and what I was going to allow to happen to her. Like, she comes very close to not surviving that situation. And of course I couldn't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But I had to really figure out, like, where is that line? How do I depict that? And how do I get her out of that? And that was difficult and very uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not an easy task to write about violence or violence against women, especially.
It is not. And I strongly believe it's not something to be glorified.
No, it isn't anything to be glorified. But, you know, I do have a book that I'm working on where I do have a woman running from abuse. And while it's difficult for me to write that, it's also important for me to write that to let women know that you can get away, you know. But again, like you said, it's difficult because you don't, you know, are you glorifying it or are you helping try to prevent it? Fine line.
There's a fine line that you have to be careful with.
Absolutely.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Fine line there. So who's your ideal reader or target audience for what you write?
Part of me still writes from a place of childhood wonder. Mm-hmm. And when I was a child growing up and learning to read, some of the books I really enjoyed reading were books or stories that reflected that there was still a little bit of magic in the world. And I kind of still write from that place, and I feel like my ideal reader is someone who's willing to go on a journey with me, who is still willing to kind of put their disbelief aside and believe that there might still be a little bit of magic in the world. And if you're willing to go with me on that journey, I feel like we can have a really, really fun time together.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like when you can connect with the characters and bring you back to that childhood era.
Yes.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I will say that some of my stories are a little bit dark, so you kind of have to also be maybe get away from that childhood wonder a little bit and be willing to embrace the darkness. My core audience, my ideal audience, is someone who's just willing to go on that journey with me.
Well, good. So how did your family react to, well, I don't want to keep going back to Ordinary Heroes, but let's pick something else that you wrote. How does your family react to any of your writing?
So my most recent story is based on an urban legend. It's my take on an urban legend. It's called Midnight Train from Tokyo, and that one will be appearing in an anthology towards the end of this month. That one I let my wife read, and I let my 18-year-old daughter read, and there is some heavy stuff in it, but it doesn't get too terribly heavy. But both of them felt like it was a really well-written story. They enjoyed it. There were a couple of twists in there, and they felt that those reveals were done at the right time and in a way that made sense and yet still surprised.
Oh, good.
But for the most part, being the black sheep of my family that I am, I'm not really in close touch with most of my immediate family other than my kids and my wife.
Right.
So to the best of my knowledge, the rest of my family doesn't necessarily read my stuff, but I do run everything I write past my wife. I trust her opinion. If she says this is something you need to change, I will change it. And if she says this is something that works, I trust her opinion and I will not change it. And kind of as beta readers, I will run it past, one or both of my daughters to get their opinions. But my older daughter, who just turned 18 this year, she seems to really like my stuff. She's always asking me, like, what are you working on now, Dad? And can I read it? I'm like, well,
that's awesome.
Some of it's an immediate, yes, you can go ahead and read it, and I'll show you next time you're here visiting. Sometimes it's, maybe when you're 25 or 30, I'll let you read this one.
I know, right?
Yep.
Oh, I understand about the black sheep of the family. I'm right there with you. And I mean, I keep in touch with them on Facebook as best as I can, and they've bought a couple of my stories, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, just don't tell me your opinion, because, nah.
Yeah. It's a little bit hard to have people you're close to and who you grew up with read your stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
When my mom was still around, I didn't necessarily show her any of my writings because I didn't know how she'd react to it, and I kind of wanted to preserve that opinion of hers that seemed to be that I was still a little boy.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to ruin that.
You're mama's little boy still. Don't break that illusion.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So who are your favorite characters?
Honestly, the work in progress that I'm working on right now, it's called Grave Threat. It's going to be probably approximately novel length. And I referred to it earlier, but the main character is a demon hunter.
Right.
He lives with his best friend, who is actually a demon, who has been expelled from the plane of hell. And
wow, what do you do to get expelled from hell? I want to know.
He was too nice. I'm not going to give details.
Okay.
The story isn't finished, but he ended up doing something that was outside of their boundaries, and he ended up doing something beneficial for someone, which you're not supposed to do if you're a demon.
Oh, bad demon, no donut.
Yes. Also, you're banished from hell.
All right.
Anyway, their best friends are a pair of witches. They're twins, and I'm just having a blast writing these characters because I'm just kind of all in. I'm letting them do their thing, and they are surprising me at every turn. So right now, I would say it's the characters that I'm currently working on. Jonas Threat, his demon friend Bartholomew, and their twin witch friends Lorelei and Siren.
Ooh.
Yes.
I am very interested to read this book. I'm just saying. And your Midnight Train to Tokyo one, too, because I am a huge fan of urban legend. Oh, wonderful. My God. Yes,
thank you.
So
that was also a fun one to write.
Oh, I bet. I love urban legends. And like I told you the other day, I never thought about writing an urban legend book.
Yeah. There's such a huge pool to choose from, too. So, yeah, I think I told you that my friend Sarah Walker had originally come up with the idea for that anthology.
Yes.
And, yes, she had invited me to submit. And I originally wanted to do something on the Black-Eyed Children, which is an urban legend I had just heard about, like, within days of her announcing, I want to do this.
What the hell is Black-Eyed Children?
Well, there's supposed to be these kids who show up in, like, I believe 19th century dress. They show up to your door, and when you open the door, you see these two young children, and their eyes are completely black. They're opaque. And apparently, if you let them in, bad things start to happen, and someone in the household will eventually die. If I remember the story correctly, yes. So that one really intrigued me because I had just found out about it. I was like, ooh, this is really exciting.
Yeah.
I, however, found out that somebody else had kind of claimed that concept. So I was like, okay, he can have that and I'll look for something else. my friend Sarah said, well, if you're interested in that, but want to do something different, here are a few ideas. So I kind of took her ideas and followed the links that she sent to me and kind of fell down this rabbit hole for a couple of days and eventually landed on this Japanese urban legend. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly because I do not speak Japanese.
Right.
But the way I would pronounce it would be Teke Teke. And
okay, yeah.
that is the story of, it's usually a young woman, college age, somewhere around there, who either falls in front of or is pushed in front of a train or a subway train or something like that, is cut in half, and she goes around looking for her legs.
Oh.
And teke teke is the sound that she makes as she pulls herself around using her hands with her bones dragging along and her fingernails on the platform. And if she approaches you and asks you a question, such as, where are my legs? If you say, I don't know, she will cut you in half. If you say, I can't remember exactly what, but if you don't answer the question correctly, then she will, take your legs or something. I put my own twist on it and just basically had a lot of fun with it. So that was Midnight Train from Tokyo.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
If I hear that teki teki sound, I'm going to freak out now. Where's my salt? Grab the salt.
Watch yourself in the subways, especially if you're in Japan.
I know, right? Oh my God. That is awesome.
Yeah. Such a rich wealth of urban legends to choose from. And I feel like that one was a really good choice for me.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it.
Yes.
Okay. So here's a good one. Do any of your characters share any of your traits?
Oh boy. Most of my main characters have a little bit of me in them. It's hard to be a writer and not put yourself into your work. I will say not all of my characters share my traits or my viewpoints, but yes, I am definitely in my work, and that is part of what makes it interesting to be a writer, because you're putting yourself out there in that particular way and kind of making yourself vulnerable in a way.
Yeah, you kind of do, don't you?
You do.
I have so many characters that I have a lot of my traits in, I don't know. It's just kind of a fun thing to do for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might give one character, one mannerism that you have, or another character just maybe one of your favorite phrases or something like that, But I find, too, that it's important to kind of balance those characters out with other characters who do not have those viewpoints or, can counteract that character just as something to bounce off of, to react to.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to get into a few little fun questions here. Noise or silence for writing?
I will occasionally play music when I write. Anything more than that, like TV or conversation in the background, will distract me, and I just can't get anything done. So I kind of have to isolate myself a little bit. And I can listen to some music, especially if it's just very much in the background. But other than that, I have to kind of be in that space where I can actually create.
Definitely. I have to have music going. Like I was talking to Sheldon earlier in an interview, once you start writing and get in that zone, it seems like it fades away, and then you're like all of a sudden back to reality, like, oh, wait, what am I listening to?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, now this always sounds dirty, like I told Sheldon in the earlier interview too. Do you Google yourself?
I did once, but I have very limited presence, and I think it came up with like my Facebook page or something like that.
Oh.
So, I mean, if I Google myself in the right way, I can find my author page on Amazon, but I have to search for my particular works.
Yes.
But yeah,
I can find you easily. I find your author page when I Google you, so it's all good.
Well, thank you. It's nice to know that somebody Googles me.
Yes, I like to Google people. Like I said, it sounds bad, but it's really not. Do you have any writing rituals?
It usually starts with me procrastinating and my wife telling me to get to work. After that, I basically just kind of sit down, and I am the type of person, I write right on my laptop as opposed to, with a pen and paper or something like that, which some people prefer. But I sit down and write on my laptop, and I just kind of try to lose myself in it. But other than that, no, not really any rituals. Like I said, I might put on some music, but that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like to have pen and paper because I get so distracted by social media sometimes that I just can't. No computer, no laptop, no nothing. Just pen and paper.
That is a danger.
Yep. It is.
I have to be aware of that as well.
Right. All right. So who inspired you to write?
Oh boy.
Who or what, I should say.
Well, I'm trying to decide how far to go back. Basically, I will say everybody I've ever read. When I was growing up, I used to think of authors with a capital A. They were something apart. They were their own thing. People who wrote books were meant to write books. I didn't really understand how they got there or how it worked, but they were kind of this lofty ideal that I had. And from a very young age, I really wanted to be a part of that. I didn't really know how to do it. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I figured, the best way to do it is by trying it out and seeing what happens. And like I said, I started writing a little bit back in high school. I think just having read the sorts of things that I've read has inspired me to try to emulate those types of stories. I mean, the old saying is, write what you know.
Yes.
I do try to do that. I also try to expand on that as well and try new things and experiment and see what captures my imagination. But really, if any book I have read has inspired me in some way, and I've tried to bring that into my own writing.
Yeah. I'm with you on that authors with a capital A thing. That's exactly how I feel too.
Yes.
Okay, so on that note, what's your favorite book or who are your favorite authors?
Favorite book and favorite author are two different things. And you're going to laugh at this, but I'm going to say it anyway. My favorite book of all time is The Monster at the End of This Book, starring lovable 4-year-old Grover.
What?
Okay. I will say that book, and my mom used to read this to me when I was very little before I could learn to read it, before I could read on my own. But it had a certain magic to it because in that book, if you're not familiar with it, it's Grover who has read the title of the book and realizes there is a monster at the end of that book. His entire purpose in that book is to keep you from turning pages. And he will do anything in his power to keep you from turning pages, including tying the pages up with ropes, building brick walls, or whatever. And at the end of the book, it turns out the monster at the end of the book is Grover himself.
Aww.
And the two things I love about that book are how it breaks the fourth wall so well.
Yeah.
And engages the reader, who is, the audience for that is a young child. But at the end, you have that little twist. You get that something unexpected. You're the first time you're reading, you're like, what's going to happen next? And when you find out it's Grover, it's like, that was unexpected, but it made total sense. And it's a pleasant resolution to this dilemma of the monster at the end of this book, which Grover thought was going to be a scary thing, but really it's just him, and it's fine, it's benign, and you have this friend you've gone on this journey with the entire time.
Yeah, Grover's amazing.
Yeah. It's still like, I will still kind of flip through it once in a while just because, like I said, I'm a child at heart.
Right.
To answer your second question right now, my favorite author that I've been reading lately is N.K. Jemisin. And I just finished reading her Broken Earth trilogy. And somehow she managed to write a trilogy of books that is both science fiction because it takes place in the distant future, but is also fantasy because it has magic in it, as well as technology. But the technology is so far advanced that it seems like magic.
What was the title of the trilogy?
It's called The Broken Earth Trilogy.
The Broken Earth.
By N.K. Jemisin. She's a fantastic author, and I feel like if I can write half as well as she does, I will be perfectly happy.
Yeah. All right. I'm making a note here to check those out.
I can also highly recommend a novel. The second one, it's the first of two books, the second of which is coming out this year, but the first one is called The City We Became, and it is a fantastic book. The concept behind it, without trying to spoil too much, is that cities are living entities, and when they become alive, they have a living avatar in the form of a human who takes on the characteristics of that city, or that's a better way to put it. Yes, so...
I like that.
Yes, and there's this evil that comes around and tries to kill the cities before they can be fully born, as it were. And it's a fantastic take. And one of the things I like about her is that you don't get the same story from her twice.
Wow.
She has very unique concepts, very unique ideas, and her writing is just mesmerizing. It's beautiful.
Wow. Okay. I'm totally
going to recommend N.K. Jemisin if you have not read her.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to Google that and find it. That's awesome. Well,
yes.
John, this has been fun.
I've enjoyed it.
Do you have any questions for me?
What's next for you? Who are you doing next?
Oh, I don't know. So I've interviewed Sheldon Higdon. I want to do Sarah Walker because of the Urban Legends anthology coming out.
Yes.
Absolutely Yeah, so I've got her and then like 2 or 3 others. Plus, okay, so I'm doing the Insecure Writers Support Group podcast the first Wednesday of every month. But I have to do my blog too to keep on with the IWSG because it's a blog hop. I can't, I've got a Q&A coming up. I've posted a question I told people on Twitter, I said, ask me anything.
Oh.
And
interesting.
Yeah, so I got quite a few questions, so I had to break it down into 2 podcasts, which was great.
Wonderful.
Love having that going on. So yeah.
Sure. Sounds like you've got a really good thing going on here.
Oh, I hope so, because I really enjoy doing this, and I don't really like my voice, just like you. I get that, but I have to say, John Farrington, who is. John Farrington, Zingathor Studios, he's like, you have a really motherly tone and you got to make sure you're a little more upbeat because I started to fall asleep. And I'm like, well, shit, I can't have that happen. He's like, there you go, swear.
There you go. Oh, damn, if I'd known we could swear the whole time, I would have been dropping F-bombs left and right.
I know. Well,
it's a family show.
I know. I try not to drop the F-bomb too much, but yeah, it happens. So
Same
here. The warning is at the end of the podcast. Warning, adult content. Mature language. It's great. Well, cool. I'm so glad you joined me in this interview. I've had a blast.
So have I. Thank you so much for having me. I've had so much fun doing this with you.
Very good. Awesome. I'm glad you had fun. Sheldon had fun too. I was like, yes.
Great.
I love it when they have fun. I hope my questions aren't boring, but I may have to change them up after a while because it'll get a little, But they're good questions. They bring out a lot of conversation.
They do. They're good for sparking discussion.
Yes.
Absolutely. And they made me think.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they made me think. So
good.
It was a good experiment for me to try to delve into my own process and into my own head and how I go about things. So,
awesome.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I forgot too that I'm going to be doing the roundtable discussions and definitely want to drag you in on that.
Oh, I'd love to be a part of that. Yes, thank you.
We have to drag Dave into one of these roundtable discussion.
Yes.
That would be awesome.
Yes. So we need to put him on notice that he will be expected to join in.
I know. So Dave, this is your notice. Just saying. He's going to kill me. That's all right. All right. Well, I'm going to finish up here with saying that our sponsor for this podcast is Zingathor Studios. If you mention this podcast, you'll get 20% off of your podcast editing or your narration for audiobooks if you do Audible. Again, just mention this podcast and Zingathor Studios will take care of you. And without them, I wouldn't be here. So I have to thank them. Thank you, Zingathor Studios. And thank you, John, for giving me the title of my podcast. I love it.
You're most welcome.
This is why we need to brainstorm more.
Yes. It works occasionally.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right. Well, thank you. And being a gamer girl, I gotta go blow shit up. So there we go.
Sounds like a plan.
Woohoo!